When my daughter told me the treatment that could save my life was a waste of money, I believed her. When she held my hand and told me our last year together would be a better use of our savings, I believed her. I did not know that our last year was just a countdown, a waiting period for her to collect my inheritance and begin a new life with the very doctor who had lied to me. My revenge would not be an angry outburst. It would be a simple, quiet medical procedure, a final defiant beat of a heart she had already buried. She thought my life was a commodity to be liquidated. She was about to receive a lesson in the one thing money can never buy: more time. Before we get to the heart of this matter, please subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what is the single greatest betrayal a child can commit against a parent? My name is Richard Albright, and at 66 years old, my body is beginning to feel like a house with a failing foundation. Here in the quiet, windswept city of San Francisco, my life has been a good one, a simple one. For 40 years, I was a civil engineer, a man who built bridges, structures of steel and concrete designed to withstand the forces of time and stress. My greatest structure, however, was the life I built with my wife, Helen. It was a life of quiet, comfortable love, a partnership as solid and as reliable as the Golden Gate Bridge I had helped maintain for 3 decades. After a sudden illness took her from me last year, the foundations of my own life began to crack. The grief was a physical weight, a constant, crushing pressure on my chest. It was a pain I had never known, but a new, more terrifying pain began to bloom alongside it. A physical pain, a weakness in my limbs, a shortness of breath. The doctors gave it a long clinical name, but the meaning was simple. My heart was failing. The diagnosis was grim, but it came with a single, narrow lifeline: a new, experimental surgical procedure. It was not a cure, but it was a chance, a real statistical chance at another 10 or 15 years of life. The problem was the cost. It was astronomical, a figure so large it seemed like a misprint. It was not covered by my insurance. The price of this chance was, to the penny, our entire life savings, the comfortable nest egg Helen and I had so carefully, so responsibly built for our retirement. My only daughter, Clara, a successful and ambitious art gallery director, became my rock. Or so I thought. She flew home from New York, her face a mask of loving, filial concern. She took charge of everything. She sat with me at doctor's appointments, her hand on my arm, her presence a profound comfort. She spent hours on the phone, her voice a determined, urgent hum as she spoke to clinics, to specialists, to anyone who would listen. She was my advocate, my warrior, the one person in the world I knew I could count on. A week later, she came to me in my quiet, sun-drenched living room, her face etched with a deep, sorrowful resignation. She was not alone. She had brought our old family friend, Dr. Finch, with her, a respected physician and a man I had known since Clara was a child. He was there, she said, to help me understand. "Dad," she began, her voice a soft, heartbreaking whisper. "We've spoken to everyone. Dr. Finch has reviewed the case. The consensus is the surgery is a long shot, a painful, brutal long shot with a very, very small chance of success." Dr. Finch nodded, his expression one of grave, professional sympathy. "Richard," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble, "Clara is right. At your age, the recovery alone could be catastrophic. To spend everything you and Helen saved on such a small possibility, it's a gamble I cannot, in good conscience, recommend." I looked at my daughter, at her tear-filled eyes. I looked at my old friend, his face a picture of sober medical authority, and I believed them. I trusted them completely. So when Clara took my hand and made her proposal, it sounded like the most selfless, loving act in the world. "So," she said, her voice cracking with a perfect, believable emotion, "let's not do it. Let's not waste our last time together in a hospital. Let's take the savings and let's live. Let's take that cruise to Alaska we always talked about. Let's have one last perfect year. A year of peace, not of pain. It was a beautiful, tender, and utterly convincing lie. It was an offer to die, wrapped in the language of love. And I, in my fear, in my grief, and in my absolute, unwavering trust in my own child, I accepted. I agreed to die. I did not know that my daughter and my oldest friend were having an affair. I did not know that they had a shared, secret future planned, a future of wealth and travel, a future that was being held up by one single inconvenient obstacle: me. I did not know that our last perfect year was not a tribute to my life, but a business plan for my death. A plan to let me fade away, quietly and naturally, so they could inherit a fortune that was still intact. Our last year began. On the surface, it was a masterpiece of loving filial devotion. Clara moved back to San Francisco, taking a leave of absence from her gallery. She dedicated herself completely to me, to my comfort, to creating a series of beautiful, poignant final memories. We went to concerts. We visited museums. We took long, slow walks along the waterfront. She was the perfect, doting daughter, and I, in my ignorance, was the grateful, dying father. Dr. Finch was a constant, supportive presence. He would stop by the house for dinner, his manner a perfect blend of old friend warmth and professional concern. He would check my blood pressure, listen to my failing heart, and offer gentle, palliative advice. He and Clara were a seamless team, two angels of mercy guiding me toward a peaceful, dignified end. The turning point, the moment, the beautiful, tragic play they had written for me was revealed as a cheap and ugly fraud, was an accident of modern technology. I had bought a new smart picture frame for my living room, a digital device that could cycle through hundreds of photographs. I had asked Clara to help me set it up, to connect it to the cloud account where all our family photos were stored. One evening, I was sitting alone, watching the images drift across the screen, a silent, flickering slideshow of my life with Helen and our daughter. Picture of Clara as a little girl on my shoulders. A picture of Helen and me on our wedding day. And then a new photo appeared, one I had never seen before. It was a picture of Clara and Dr. Finch. They were on a beautiful, sun-drenched beach, the kind you see in travel brochures. They were not standing apart like old friends. They were in each other's arms, their heads close together, their smiles intimate and unguarded. It was a lover's embrace. A small digital timestamp at the bottom of the photo read, "Cancun 3 months ago." 3 months ago. While I was at home, grappling with my diagnosis, my daughter and my best friend had been on a secret romantic vacation together. The photo was only on the screen for 10 seconds before the slideshow moved on, but it was enough. It was a lightning flash in a dark room, a single brilliant moment of illumination that revealed the true, ugly shape of everything. The lie was not just about the surgery. The lie was my entire life. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest with a force I had not felt in months, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place with a sickening, terrible clarity. Their perfectly coordinated performance, their shared, practiced narrative about the surgery's low chances of success, their insistence on preserving the savings. It was not a plan for my peaceful death. It was a plan for their comfortable future. The grief was a physical blow. It was a pain far sharper, far more profound than any symptom of my failing heart. This was not a betrayal from an enemy. It was a betrayal from the two people on earth, besides my late wife, whom I had loved and trusted the most. They had looked at my life, my love, my very existence, and had placed it on a scale opposite a pile of money, and my life had been found wanting. My decision was made in that cold, silent, and utterly broken moment. I would not confront them. I would not give them the satisfaction of a screaming match, of a dramatic, tearful scene. My revenge would be quiet, It would be clinical, and it would be the one thing they had worked so hard to prevent. My revenge would be my own survival. The next morning, I made a phone call. It was not to my daughter, and it was not to my lawyer. It was to the world-renowned heart clinic in Cleveland, the one Dr. Finch had so expertly dismissed. I spoke to the head of their surgical department, and I told him my story. I did not mention the betrayal. I simply told him I was a 66-year-old man who had been told he had no hope, and I was calling to ask for a second opinion. I had my medical records sent over. 2 days later, the head surgeon called me back himself. His voice was calm, professional, and full of a quiet, confident anger. "Mr. Albright," he said, "I have reviewed your case, and I have to tell you, the advice you were given was not just conservative. It was, in my professional opinion, medically indefensible. You are a prime candidate for this procedure. I can't give you a guarantee, no surgeon can, but I can give you a real fighting chance." I had the truth. A truth from an unimpeachable source. A truth that was a scalpel, ready to cut away the cancerous lie that had taken over my life. I knew what I had to do. I had to get the money, my money, away from them before they knew what was happening. And then I had to disappear into the one place they believed I would never go, a hospital operating room. They thought my story was in its final chapter. They had no idea I was about to write a stunning, unexpected sequel. What is the most powerful motivator for a person to fight for their life? Love, hope, or the desire to prove someone wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hit the like button if you believe in second chances. The surgeon's words were a lifeline, a thin, strong thread of hope in a sea of lies. My path was now clear, but it was a treacherous one. I had to orchestrate my own survival, a quiet, secret rebellion against the two people who were acting as my loving, gentle jailers. The full, chilling scope of their betrayal was now my constant companion. Every time Clara would bring me a cup of tea, her face a mask of loving concern, I saw the woman on the beach in Cancun. Every time Dr. Finch would visit, patting my shoulder with a sad, eternalistic air, I saw the man who had looked at my medical charts and had sentenced me to death for a paycheck. They were not just my daughter and my friend. They were my would-be murderers, and their weapon of choice was a slow, gentle, and utterly suffocating kindness. The immediate consequence was that my life became a clandestine operation. I had to move my life savings, the very prize they were waiting for, out of their reach. I could not simply go to the bank and make a transfer. They monitored my accounts, a protective measure they claimed to prevent me from being scammed by fraudsters. The irony was a bitter, daily pill. I contacted a new lawyer, a sharp, discreet woman in a different city, a woman with no connection to my old life. I explained the situation to her, the fraudulent medical advice, the conspiracy to seize my assets. The cold, hard anger in her eyes was a profound comfort. She saw the truth immediately. Together, we devised a plan. It was a simple but effective piece of financial misdirection. My lawyer drafted a letter, a fabricated offer from a real estate developer for a piece of commercial property I had inherited from my father years ago, a property Clara and Dr. Finch knew I had been trying to sell. The offer was for a significant sum, an amount slightly larger than my total life savings. I showed the letter to Clara, my hands trembling with a feigned, elderly excitement. "Look at this, Clara," I said, my voice full of a believable, hopeful energy. "After all these years, if this goes through, our last year could be a last decade. We could do anything." She and Dr. Finch took the bait completely. They saw the letter not as a threat to their inheritance, but as a massive, unexpected bonus. They encouraged me to sell, to move all my liquid assets into a single accessible account to facilitate the complex, all-cash transaction. They were so blinded by this new, larger prize that they gladly, eagerly helped me consolidate my entire net worth into a single vulnerable pile. They thought they were helping me collect a windfall. They had no idea they were helping me pack my escape fund. While they were busy dreaming of their new, even larger fortune, I was on the phone with the clinic in Cleveland. I had my second opinion, a real one, via a video conference with Dr. Evans, the head surgeon. I had my lawyer secretly record the entire conversation. Dr. Evans, with a calm, professional fury, dismantled Dr. Finch's fraudulent advice, piece by piece, creating a perfect, unimpeachable record of his medical malpractice. The surgery was scheduled. I had a date, a time, a flight to catch. The final piece of my plan was to write a letter, a single, simple letter that would serve as my only explanation, my final word until I was hopefully on the other side of the surgery. I wrote it on a clear, cold morning, the words coming with a sad, resolute clarity. It was not a letter of anger or accusation. It was a letter of quiet, devastating fact. It detailed the affair, the lies about the surgery, the planned theft of my inheritance. And it contained a single high-resolution printout of the photograph from Cancun, the picture that had started it all. I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote my daughter's name on the front. I gave it to my new lawyer. The day I go into surgery, I told her, I want you to place this letter, along with a notice that my entire estate has been moved into a protected medical trust, on the kitchen table in my house. That is all. No phone call, no confrontation. Just a quiet, undeniable truth waiting for them in a silent house. I was not just planning a surgery, I was planning a disappearance. I was going to vanish from their lives, from their careful, murderous plan, and reappear as a ghost, a survivor they had already buried. They were planning my funeral. I was planning my rebirth. Have you ever had to make a life or death decision in complete secret? Share your thoughts on that pressure in the comments below. The final days leading up to my secret departure were the most difficult performance of my life. I had to live inside the lie, to breathe its toxic air, while my heart and mind were entirely focused on my escape. My decision was made, my plan was in motion, and every interaction with Clara and Dr. Finch was a scene in a play where only I knew the devastating final act. I watched them as they moved through my house, their confidence growing with every passing day. They had become the masters of my small world, their loving concern a constant, suffocating presence. They would discuss the final details of our trip, a grand tour of Europe that was scheduled to begin the week after my surgery was actually taking place. Clara would show me brochures of river cruises and Tuscan villas, her eyes shining with a false, bright light. "Won't it be wonderful, Dad?" she would say, her voice a soft, gentle melody. Just us, no more doctors, no more worries. Dr. Finch would join in, his tone one of avuncular, benevolent wisdom. "You've earned this, Richard," he would say, patting my shoulder. "A year of peace and beauty. It's the best medicine of all." They were so lost in the performance of their own compassion, so enamored with the beautiful, tragic story they had created, that they were completely blind. They saw a frail, dying man, a man whose will had been broken. They did not see the quiet, resolute survivor who was counting down the hours to his own secret, defiant act of living. My lawyer, in the meantime, was a silent, efficient engine of war. The day the fictional real estate deal was supposed to close, she executed the final, critical move. With the power of attorney I had granted her, she transferred my entire life savings, the consolidated fortune that Clara and Dr. Finch had so eagerly helped me assemble, into the new, ironclad medical trust. The account was now a fortress, accessible only by her, for the sole, stated purpose of my medical care. The money was safe. My lifeline was secure. The final preparation was a quiet, personal one. The night before my flight to Cleveland, I walked through my silent house, a ghost saying his own goodbyes. I stood in the living room and looked at the photographs on the mantelpiece, the frozen, smiling moments of a life I now knew was a carefully curated lie. I went into Helen's old garden. The scent of the night-blooming jasmine, a painful, beautiful reminder of a love I now knew I was the only one who had truly honored. This was not just a house. It was a museum of a life that had never really existed, and I was its last, heartbroken visitor. I packed a single small bag. I took nothing of value, only the necessities for the hospital. I left behind the photos, the books, the furniture. I was shedding a life, an identity, and walking into a new, uncertain future with nothing but the quiet, stubborn beat of my own failing heart. Before I left, I did one last thing. I went to the smart picture frame, the one that had been the catalyst for this whole terrible revelation. I found the photograph of Clara and Dr. Finch in Cancun, and I set it as the single permanent image on the screen. It would be there, a silent, smiling testament to their treachery, glowing in the dark, waiting for them to find it alongside the letter. My lawyer arrived at dawn. I left her the letter and the keys to my house. We did not say much. There was nothing left to say. She drove me to the airport, and I walked through the quiet, pre-dawn terminal, a simple, anonymous old man with a small suitcase and a very big secret. As the plane took off, banking over the sleeping city, I looked down at the glittering grid of lights, and I felt not sadness, but a profound and liberating sense of release. I was not just flying toward a surgery. I was flying away from a lie. The final stage was now in my lawyer's hands. She would wait until she received the call from the hospital that I was safely in pre-op. Then she would drive to my house, let herself in, place the letter on the kitchen table, and leave, locking the door behind her. The trap was set. The evidence was in place. And the two people who had been so busy planning my peaceful, profitable death were about to receive a quiet, devastating message from a man who had, against all their best efforts, chosen to live. Before the final act, a question for you. Please hit the like button if you believe that survival is the ultimate form of revenge. In the comments below, tell me, what is the bravest decision a person can make? The surgery was a long, brutal, and ultimately successful battle. I emerged from the anesthetic fog hours later, a man disassembled and stitched back together, my chest a landscape of bandages and pain, but beneath it all, a heart that was beating with a slow, strong, and steady rhythm. I was alive, and in the quiet, beeping sanctuary of the intensive care unit, my first lucid thought was not of my own recovery, but of the quiet, devastating drama that I knew was unfolding 3,000 miles away in San Francisco. My lawyer, true to her word, had executed the final stage of the plan with the precision of a surgeon. After receiving the call from the hospital that my surgery had begun, she drove to my quiet, empty house. She used the key I had given her, letting herself into the silent space that was now a perfect baited trap. She walked to the kitchen and placed the single white envelope containing my letter in the very center of the polished oak table. Then she walked into the living room and turned on the digital picture frame, ensuring the smiling, sun-drenched image of Clara and Dr. Finch in Cancun was the first thing anyone would see. She then left, locking the door behind her, leaving the truth to wait in the silence. The call, my lawyer told me later, came from Clara at 3 o'clock that afternoon. She had been trying to reach me all day to discuss the final details of our trip, and my uncharacteristic silence had slowly curdled from a minor annoyance into a real gnawing concern. "Have you heard from my father?" Clara had asked my lawyer, her voice a tight coil of anxiety. "He's not answering his phone. I'm starting to get worried." My lawyer's response was a masterpiece of cool, professional detachment. "I believe your father left a letter for you at the house, Miss Albright," she said. "Perhaps it will answer your questions." That was all she said. The bait was laid. I can picture the scene with a clarity that is almost cinematic. I can see Clara and Dr. Finch arriving at my house, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and irritation. I can see them walking into the living room, their eyes immediately drawn to the single glowing image on the picture frame. The picture of them in Cancun, the smiling, undeniable proof of their first lie. I can imagine the sudden, cold shock, the jolt of adrenaline, the frantic, whispered questions. And then I can see them spotting the single white envelope on the kitchen table, my name written on the front. A letter from a man they believed they controlled completely. The plan was in motion. The truth was being read. The beautiful, elaborate lie they had constructed over the course of a year was being dismantled, line by devastating line, in the quiet of my kitchen. While they were absorbing the first shockwave of the revelation, my lawyer was delivering the second. She sent a single formal email to Dr. Finch's personal account and to the board of directors at his hospital. The email was simple. It contained a copy of Dr. Evans' official, damning medical opinion of his grossly negligent advice. It contained the full, unedited recording of my video conference with the Cleveland Clinic, where his name and his fraudulent prognosis were discussed at length by the head of surgery. And it contained a simple, declarative statement. Mr. Richard Albright is currently in post-operative recovery following a successful cardiac procedure. Any and all future correspondence on this matter should be directed to my office. The trap was not just personal, it was professional. It was not just a letter on a kitchen table. It was a legal and ethical time bomb that had just been detonated in the heart of his prestigious career. The final piece of the plan was the one that would hit them where they were most vulnerable, their shared, greedy heart. The next morning, my lawyer sent a final certified letter to them both. It was a formal notice that the entirety of my estate had been legally and irrevocably transferred into a protected medical trust. It detailed, with cold legal precision, that the funds could only be used for my medical care and my long-term recovery. The letter ended with a single, simple, and utterly devastating sentence. As per the terms of the trust, upon Mr. Albright's death, any and all remaining funds will be donated in their entirety to the American Heart Association. The money was gone. The inheritance they had conspired for, the fortune they had been willing to let me die for, had been vaporized, transformed into a charitable donation that would, with a beautiful and brutal irony, help to fund the very kind of life-saving research they had tried to deny me. Their plan was not just in ruins, it had been inverted. Their greed was now funding the very science that had saved me from them. They had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and left with nothing but the smoldering ashes of their own beautiful, ugly, and now utterly worthless lie. Is the loss of a fortune more painful than the loss of a reputation? Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to hit the like button if you believe in the power of a second chance. The news of my survival, of my successful surgery, was not a piece of information they received with relief. It was a verdict. It was the sudden, shocking reappearance of a ghost they had already buried, a ghost who had returned not to haunt them, but to bankrupt them. The fallout, as my lawyer described it to me during my slow, painful days of recovery in Cleveland, was a quiet and systematic demolition. Dr. Finch's world crumbled first. The hospital board, faced with the irrefutable evidence of his malpractice and the looming threat of a massive public lawsuit, moved swiftly. He was suspended, then quietly forced into an early, disgraced retirement. His reputation, a carefully constructed edifice of 40 years of professional integrity, was reduced to rubble in a matter of days. He had been a god in the small, insular world of San Francisco medicine, and now he was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in hospital corridors. He had tried to play God with my life, and he had been undone by the simple, secular power of a second opinion. Clara's downfall was less public, but in many ways more profound. The man she had betrayed me for, the powerful, wealthy doctor who had promised her a new, glittering life, was now a disgraced and broken man himself. The foundation of their future, The shared, stolen inheritance was gone. They were left with nothing but the ugly, sour reality of their own treacherous hearts. The climax of my revenge was not a single dramatic moment, but a slow, creeping, and inevitable tide of consequences. But there was one final, quiet scene that, for me, served as the true emotional culmination of their story. About a month after my surgery, after I had returned to San Francisco, and was beginning my long, slow recovery in a quiet rehabilitation facility, my lawyer arranged a final meeting. It was not a confrontation. It was a legal formality. We met in her sterile downtown conference room. Clara and a haggard-looking Dr. Finch sat on one side of the long, polished table. I sat on the other, with my lawyer by my side. I was frail, I was tired, my voice was a little weak. But my heart, my new, mended heart, was beating with a slow, strong, and steady rhythm. They did not look at me. They stared at the table, at their hands, at anything but the face of the man they had left for dead. The purpose of the meeting was simple. My lawyer presented them with a legal document, a non-disclosure and settlement agreement. It was a simple, brutal contract. In exchange for my agreeing not to pursue criminal charges or a public lawsuit against them, they would agree to disappear from my life, completely and forever. They would have no contact, no claims, no connection to me of any kind. It was a contract of erasure. Dr. Finch signed it immediately, his hand shaking, a man desperate to cauterize a wound that was threatening to consume his entire life. Clara hesitated. She looked up, and for the first time, her eyes met mine across the long, polished table. I saw in her eyes not remorse, not sadness, not even anger. I saw a flicker of the same cold, calculating practicality she had displayed all along. She was weighing her options, even now. And in that moment, I knew that the daughter I had loved, the little girl who had sat on my shoulders, was well and truly gone. This woman was a stranger, a failed business partner looking for the best possible exit strategy. She signed the document, and then, as they were getting up to leave, I spoke my first and only words to them. My voice was quiet, but it filled the silent room. "The money from the trust," I said, looking directly at my daughter. After it paid for the surgery, there was a significant amount left over. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a sudden, desperate, pathetic spark of hope. The greedy, calculating mind, even in its ruin, was still looking for an angle. "I have instructed my lawyer," I continued, my voice as calm and as steady as the new valve in my heart, "to use the remainder to establish a new grant at the Cleveland Clinic. It will be called the Helen Albright Second Chance Fund. It will provide full funding for patients who, like me, cannot afford the life-saving surgery they need." I let the words sink in. I let her understand the final, beautiful, and brutal irony of my survival. The money she had tried to steal, the money she had let me die for, would now be used, in her mother's name, to save countless other lives. Her act of profound, selfish cruelty had been transformed by my own simple, stubborn act of living into a legacy of pure, selfless generosity. That was the moment I finally saw her break. The cold, calculating mask finally shattered, and I saw on her face the pure, unadulterated agony of a soul that has been perfectly, poetically, and permanently defeated. She had not just lost the money. She had lost the war of meaning itself. Her greed had been turned into charity. Her betrayal had been turned into a legacy of hope. And she had been left with nothing but the lifelong, bitter taste of her own empty, worthless choices. What is the most powerful weapon against greed? Justice, forgiveness, or a quiet, unassuming act of generosity? Hit the subscribe button if you believe in the power of a second chance, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. The signing of the settlement was the last time I ever saw either of them. They walked out of that conference room, and out of my life forever, two ghosts disappearing back into the fog of a world I no longer inhabited. The silence they left behind was not an empty one. It was a clean, quiet space, a blank page on which I could begin to write the rest of my story. My recovery was a slow uphill climb, a daily disciplined battle to reclaim my own strength. But with every beat of my mended heart, I felt a growing sense of a future I had never expected to have. I did not return to my old house. It was a museum of a life that was no longer mine, a place haunted by the ghosts of a false love and a counterfeit friendship. I had my lawyer sell it, and the proceeds were folded into the Helen Albright Second Chance Fund, another piece of my old life transformed into a new hope for a stranger. I moved into a small, modern apartment overlooking the bay, a place with no memories, no shadows, just a wide, clean view of the water and the sky. I began to rebuild my life, not as a husband, not as a father, but simply as a man, Richard Albright, a survivor. The Helen Albright Second Chance Fund became the focus of my new life. I served on the board, a quiet, anonymous member who took a deep, profound satisfaction in reviewing the applications. I would read the stories of people from all walks of life, people who, like me, had been told that their lives were too expensive to save. And I would, with a simple, quiet vote, give them the one thing that had been so nearly stolen from me, a chance. The fund saved its first life 6 months after its creation, a young mother of 2 from Ohio. The second was an old retired teacher from Florida. The third was a young man who dreamed of being a chef. Each one was a quiet, personal victory, a ripple of hope spreading out from the single, ugly stone of my own betrayal. I never heard what became of Dr. Finch. He had simply vanished from the world I knew, a disgraced man living out his days in a self-imposed exile of shame. Clara, I learned through a distant relative, had moved to Europe. She had tried to restart her career in the art world, but the story of her betrayal, a story of such cold and calculated cruelty, was a stain that even the ocean could not wash away. She was a woman adrift, her future a blank, empty canvas she had no idea how to fill. I felt no triumph in their ruin. My revenge was never about their punishment. It was about my own quiet, defiant act of living. It was about taking their ugly, selfish narrative and rewriting it into a story of hope and redemption. One afternoon, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the fog roll in over the Golden Gate Bridge, the bridge I had spent so much of my life maintaining. I thought about its engineering, about the way it was designed to sway, to bend with the stresses of the wind and the earth, but to never, ever break. And I felt a quiet kinship with that old, beautiful structure. I, too, had been subjected to an unbearable stress. I, too, had been bent to the breaking point. But I had not broken. My heart, a marvel of both medical science and a stubborn will to live, was beating strong and true. My future, once a closed book, was now an open, unwritten page. And the legacy of my wife Helen was not in a bank account or a shared memory with a faithless daughter, but in the quiet, steady heartbeats of strangers and the second chances. Her name was now giving to the world. That was my victory. That was my justice. That was my so sweet revenge. Thank you for following my story. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you believe is the most important foundation for a long and happy life.